This is a story that broke me more times than I can count, a case that I almost didn't cover because what this little girl endured was beyond horrifying. I had to stop multiple times while researching. I had to breathe, cry, and remind myself that Teghan's story deserves to be told, no matter how painful it is. The following content discusses graphic details of child abuse and murder. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Over 60 bite marks, 140 injuries, 70% blood loss. Each number represents a moment of unthinkable pain in a 4-year-old's final hours. Teghan Skiba's autopsy report reads like a horror story, the kind that makes you ask, how could anyone do this to a child? The sheer brutality defies comprehension. These aren't just statistics. They're a testament to suffering no child should endure. But the real horror lies in the mind behind the violence. What drives someone to commit such acts? Today, we're dissecting the psychology of a killer and the judicial battle that followed one of America's most disturbing crimes. Teghan Skiba's story began like many others. A child born into an ordinary family in 2006. Her parents, Helen Reyes and Jerry Skiba, separated shortly after her birth due to Jerry's struggles with addiction, leaving Helen to raise Teghan alone. Helen worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter, filling Teghan's early years with laughter, playground adventures, and the kind of innocent joy every child deserves. Then Helen met Jonathan Douglas Richardson. He appeared to be a caring partner, but his past told a different story. Arrests for assault, property damage, and DUIs painted a picture of a man with a dangerous temper. Family members described him as aggressive and verbally abusive, yet Helen allowed him into Teghan's life. The cracks appeared quickly. Richardson's anger flared over minor things, and Helen grew quieter, as if walking on eggshells. When she enlisted in the Army Reserve, she faced a critical decision. Who would care for Teghan during her training? Despite having loving grandparents as an option, Helen chose Richardson, a choice that would unravel everything. Looking back, the decision seems unthinkable. Abusers often manipulate their partners, isolating them and eroding their instincts. Helen may have believed Richardson could change, or that his rage wouldn't target Teghan. But the truth was far worse. The moment Helen left, Richardson's facade crumbled. Behind closed doors, the abuse began immediately. At just 4 years old, Teghan endured horrors no child should face. Neighbors later recalled hearing cries, but never intervened, unaware of the nightmare unfolding inside. By the time Helen returned, Teghan was unrecognizable. The vibrant little girl was now a shadow, her body marked with bruises and bite marks. The happy child who once played freely was broken, her wounds telling a story too painful to comprehend. Those 10 days were only the beginning. Richardson's true nature had surfaced, and the worst was yet to come, leading to one of the most horrific child abuse cases investigators had ever seen. For 10 days, Teghan Skiba lived through a nightmare few could imagine. The moment Helen left for military training, the abuse began. It started small, harsh words, rough handling, but within hours, it escalated into something far worse. Richardson bit her 66 times, leaving marks covering her tiny arms, legs, and face. Each wound represented unimaginable pain for a child who didn't understand why this was happening. As the hours turned to days, something far more sinister unfolded behind closed doors. Neighbors heard high-pitched cries late at night, sounds some later admitted made them uneasy, but no one intervened. Inside the house, the torture grew more inventive. Richardson used an electrical cord, whipping her bare skin until it split open. He tore off her fingernails with pliers. The shed where much of this occurred reeked of urine and rot, its walls splintered and floors sticky with substances no child should ever encounter. Medical reports revealed 37 fractured ribs, some fresh, others partially healed, showing this was no single outburst but sustained brutality. Her skin became a patchwork of bruises, burns, and open wounds. By the 8th day, she'd lost 70% of her blood. Her body was shutting down, yet the torment continued. Forensic experts described the injuries as systematic. The clustered bite marks suggested deliberate placement, while whip marks showed repetitive, methodical strikes. Psychologists noted this wasn't mere rage. It was about control, dominating someone completely helpless. On the 10th day, Teghan fell silent. No crying, no struggling. Richardson finally took her to a hospital, claiming she'd fallen off a bed. Doctors immediately recognized the lie. Wounds layered over wounds, evidence of days of violence. The final blow was a traumatic brain injury that would prove fatal. Police found Teghan unconscious, her body broken beyond saving. She held on for 3 more days. Investigators discovered the shed's walls smeared red, the floor tacky underfoot. Nearby lay an audio recording, a child's whisper repeating, "I'm sorry." No anger, just resignation, as if she believed she deserved this. The medical examiner documented 144 separate injuries, not one accident. Every mark proved intent. But the true horror? It could have been stopped if neighbors had called about the screams. If someone had questioned why no one saw the 4-year-old for days. If Helen hadn't left her with a violent man. The abuse didn't happen in isolation. There were signs. None were enough to save her. When Jonathan Douglas Richardson carried Teghan into the hospital, he had a ready-made explanation. She had fallen off a bed, he claimed, just a tragic accident. But the doctors who saw Teghan's small, broken body knew immediately that his story didn't add up. No fall could cause the kind of injuries they were looking at. Bite marks covering her skin, whip marks crisscrossing her back, missing fingernails and fractured ribs. This was systematic abuse, evident in the bruises, in various stages of healing, and the traumatic head wound, causing brain swelling. Medical staff transferred Teghan to a trauma center where specialists documented every injury. The evidence spoke louder than Richardson's shifting excuses. Forensic experts later confirmed the bite marks were clustered and deep, some showing signs of healing. The whip marks matched an electrical cord's width, and injuries inside her mouth suggested she'd been gagged. Dr. Jonathan Prevett, the medical examiner, noted marks on her neck consistent with a power cord, evidence that Richardson had strangled her. The autopsy revealed 144 separate injuries, 66 bites, 37 broken ribs, and traces of her blood on objects in Richardson's home. These damning details opened the floodgates for a deeper inquiry. The hospital staff had recognized the signs, documented the evidence, and alerted police, but it was too late for Teghan. She died 3 days after admission, her body unable to recover. The investigation shifted to homicide. Detectives now had a clear suspect in a crime that defied comprehension. Doctors, nurses, and forensic experts had given statements. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't reckless discipline. It was methodical, repeated brutality. What happened next would challenge the legal system to respond to one of the most horrific cases of child abuse they had ever seen. For Teghan's family, the medical staff, and the public, soon to learn the full extent of her suffering. Justice couldn't come soon enough. Prosecutors called several witnesses to describe what they saw. One of them was Nurse Mary Allison Butler. She had seen a lot in her years of work, but nothing like this. She said that when she saw Teghan's broken little body, something inside her snapped. She was so overwhelmed with emotion that she confronted Richardson in the emergency room. Through tears, she said, "It was horrible. We see a lot of stuff." At that point, I couldn't take any more. She admitted she jumped on top of him, grabbed him, and tried to rip out his throat. That's the kind of pain this case caused, even for professionals, even for people who see tragedy every day. Teghan's suffering shook people to their core, but there's something else you need to know, something that makes this even harder to understand. The U.S. Army, over the years, created many programs to support soldiers who are also parents. They knew training and deployment could be hard, especially for single moms like Helen Reyes. So, they had something called a family care plan, a document where soldiers write down who will care for their child if they're away. It's serious, and every single parent must fill one out. When the Army looked into it, they discovered that Helen did fill out a plan, but she didn't list Jonathan Richardson. She wrote down her own mother, Teghan's grandmother, as the person responsible for her child. That means she knew what the right choice was. But when it came time to leave for training, she left Teghan with Richardson anyway. Child welfare workers later said Helen failed to protect her daughter. She was charged with negligent child abuse, causing serious bodily injury. Investigators found out something even more heartbreaking. Helen knew about the abuse. She had seen it. She watched Richardson force little Teghan to chug a beer, a Corona, and 2 natural lights. She admitted that he beat Teghan while she went to the store. She saw him whip her daughter and did nothing. One sheriff said it plainly. This so-called mother failed to provide the care that children need, desire, and deserve. This part of the story is painful, but it's necessary because it shows how silence, how looking away, can destroy a life. When police searched Jonathan Richardson's home, they found the shed where most of the abuse occurred. The small structure stood just 150 feet from his grandparents' house, a silent witness to the horrors inside, its walls bearing bloodstains like a macabre ledger of pain. Investigators discovered items stained with Teghan's blood, but the most damning evidence was an electrical cord, its frayed edges matching the whip marks on her body. Nearby, metal pliers confirmed the removal of her fingernails. Every detail pointed to prolonged, methodical torture. The most chilling discovery wasn't physical. Detectives uncovered an audio recording left in the shed. Teghan's voice, quiet and broken, pleaded, "I won't ask to use the bathroom again," as if bargaining for mercy. Richardson's response was icy. "Shut up, betch." The recording ended with the sound of a blow. Others captured her whimpers, cries for her mother, or eerie silences broken by his curses. These weren't outbursts of rage. They were proof of calculated cruelty. As the evidence mounted, forensic experts pieced together the timeline. Bite marks on Teghan's body matched Richardson's teeth, some so deep they tore her skin. Medical examiners noted injuries in various stages of healing. Dr. Jonathan Prevett testified about the neck wound. The pattern was consistent with a power cord. The head trauma, he said, was catastrophic, with brain matter beginning to protrude. These injuries revealed a sustained campaign of violence. Richardson showed no remorse. Confronted with photos of Teghan's body or the recordings, he remained indifferent, sticking to his implausible story. She'd fallen off a bed. He couldn't explain the bite marks or the audio. His silence and lack of guilt became their own evidence. Prosecutors moved swiftly. First-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, torture. The charges reflected the brutality of the crime. Richardson, held without bond, faced an airtight case. The recordings alone ensured the jury would hear Teghan's final moments. Authorities questioned his grandparents, who claimed ignorance despite the shed's proximity and Teghan's absence from school. Without direct proof of their involvement, they weren't charged. The case now rested with the legal system. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, armed with overwhelming evidence. Their challenge, convincing 12 jurors that Jonathan Richardson deserved it. The courtroom fell silent as the trial began. Prosecutors Greg Butler and Paul Jackson presented their case against Jonathan Richardson, describing him as a sadist and a killer. They displayed photos of Teghan's 66 bite marks, whip marks, matching an electrical cord, and missing fingernails. Then came the recording, 37 seconds of Teghan's weak voice repeating, "I won't ask to use the bathroom again." Jurors shifted, some wiped tears. The prosecution called it premeditated torture and sought the death penalty. Defense attorney Mike Klinkosum fought back. He argued that Richardson's abusive father and mentally ill mother contributed to untreated anger issues. Life without parole is punishment enough, he pleaded, describing prison as its own torment. But the jury remained unmoved. The sentencing phase took 3 hours. Death. Teghan's grandfather trembled outside. He should be dead tomorrow. Judge Thomas Locke agreed, calling the crime unimaginable. Richardson stared blankly as the sentence was read. Even veteran detective Matt Dilva admitted on the stand, worst case of his 18-year career. This wasn't a crime of passion. The recordings, the bite marks, the broken ribs, all pointed to calculated cruelty. The defense's arguments about Richardson's childhood crumbled under that weight. As the courtroom emptied, Teghan's family clutched her book. The jury avoided Richardson's gaze. Bailiffs exhaled. For them, the trial was over. For Teghan's loved ones, the real ordeal had just begun. Questions lingered. Why hadn't neighbors called about the crying? How could someone so remorseless play victim? The trial provided answers, not comfort. Justice was served, but nothing could undo what was done. Only a 4-year-old's voice remained, whispering 2 words, "I'm sorry." Helen was charged with felony negligent child abuse. Prosecutors argued she'd ignored the red flags, leaving Teghan with a man she knew was violent. The court sentenced her to 18 months in prison, a fraction of Richardson's punishment, but a lifelong sentence of guilt. The legal fallout extended beyond Richardson and Helen. Jonathan's grandparents, who owned the property, faced questions. Neighbors had reported cries from the shed, yet no one intervened. Detectives found their claims of ignorance hard to believe. Without proof, no charges were filed, but the community's anger lingered. Why Teghan? Abusers often target the vulnerable, those who can't fight back. At 4 years old, she depended completely on caregivers. Richardson's escalating violence followed a known pattern, removing fingernails to prevent scratching, methods to break her spirit. This wasn't random. It was tactical domination. Could this have been prevented? Richardson's violent tendencies were documented, yet he was left with a child. Psychology meets real-world consequences here. Abuse isn't always visible. The most dangerous abusers hide in plain sight. Psychologists concluded multiple factors drove Richardson: genetics, trauma, personality disorders, but none excused his actions. The recordings prove he knew what he was doing. The injuries show calculation, not rage. That's the terrifying truth. Someone could do this with clear intention. Teghan's case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Some people choose cruelty. No explanation makes sense of that choice. Her story isn't just about one killer. It's about recognizing danger before it's too late. How many warning signs must we ignore before tragedy strikes? Richardson's history was full of them. Teghan paid the price. Teghan Skiba's story is one we should never forget because her death was preventable. She was just 4 years old. She suffered in silence while the world looked away. Let this be your wake-up call. If you ever hear a child crying for help, don't second-guess yourself. Don't stay silent. Make the call. Report the suspicion. Be the voice they don't have. Save the child abuse hotline number. Learn the signs. Speak up. Support organizations that protect children and help vulnerable families. Justice doesn't end in a courtroom. It begins with all of us choosing to act. In Teghan's memory, let's promise, never again. If you see something, say something. It could be the most important thing you ever do. If this story moved you, help us give voice to the voiceless. Subscribe to Secrets in the Shadows and turn on notifications so you don't miss the stories that matter. Like this video if you believe every child deserves to be safe, seen, and protected. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in my next video.